So before I go any further, did that look familiar to anybody? Either nod your head or take yourself off mute, so I want to kind of get a feel for who's got Outlook groups and who does not have those groups. I see Heather's nodding her head. A lot of kind of like stares of like, oh my gosh, I have no idea what this was all about.
Yes, we have it, but we're not using it very well.
Okay. All right. So that was kind of the point I was making starting out too. Different organizations are going to use different levels of functionality. That version that we saw not only works with OneNote, but it was also using a SharePoint example. And so that is definitely beyond the scope of this training. SharePoint is an internal file sharing service that Microsoft provides. It's a great way to collaborate on documents. If your organization has gone to Office 365 and OneDrive, you can also do some of that collaboration on OneDrive as well. So for those of you that are not, for those of you that don't have that, all right, so it looks like many people do not have it. Okay, so that's why I wanted to share that video sort of as a starting point, because if very few of you have that, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail in terms of how you would maximize groups. What I'll do is show you some other things that you can do in Outlook to help when you're managing multiple managers and also multiple projects and functionality. So the next question I have for everyone, and you can either leave it in a chat or take yourself off or nod your head if you've got your video camera on, is how many of you have access to what they call OWA, Outlook Web Access, and how many only have Outlook through a desktop application? So if you've got both, let me know. Most organizations do allow you to have Outlook Web. And the reason I'm asking that question is the interface is going to look different depending on if you're accessing it through OWA or just the desktop. So there are some things that I will show you that might not look exactly the same. That's also going to vary based on which version of Outlook your company is currently using. So I have worked with 2010, 2013, and 2016. I'm currently running the most recent version. So again, it may look a little bit different, but the functionality remains the same. So just so that we're as close to possible as being on the same page with that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my desktop, and we're going to take a look at Outlook, assuming my computer wants to behave. And I'm just going to go in and mute everybody. Okay, so this should look like a fairly common interface for those of you that use Outlook on a regular basis. I'm going to just bring the chat up so I can see if there's any questions. And again, I am using Outlook not on Exchange Server, but just on the standalone Office 365 version. On the left-hand panel, we have all of your standard folders, and of course, you can add your own. Now, depending on the security settings that your company's IT department has set up, you can actually add in additional mailboxes to your Outlook account. So I've actually got my company email and then my own personal email merged into one. Because I own my company, I tell my IT guy what I want, so it's a little bit different than when I was working in a large corporation. At the bottom, you've got some quick access panels for mail, for calendar, for favorites, and then the three dots allow you to set up what other navigation options you would like. So I'm going to focus on calendar for right now. So this should seem like a fairly normal calendar view. One of the features that you can do within Outlook is set it up to give you the weather, and you can add locations. So let's say that you are planning travel in your company for people coming in from multiple locations, or you're arranging travel for one or more managers to another location. You can add that into your calendar, switch the location, and then you can give whoever you're arranging travel for a heads up to say like, hey, by the way, there's rain in the forecast when you're on your trip. You might want to pack for that. We also have on the left-hand side the different calendars. Shared calendars allow you to share a calendar with somebody else in your organization. All right, good. Well, that some people are saying it looks familiar. So there are a couple of things that you can do with shared calendars. First of all, if your IT security permissions allow, you can actually go out to the Outlook website and get a calendar. So I am a Chicago Blackhawks fan. Those of you that are Nashville Predators fans, please don't boo me too badly. But I can go in and get my Blackhawks schedule, and I can add that to my calendar so I know exactly when they're playing. I can also share my calendar with somebody. So let's say that I want to share the holiday time off calendar with my administrative assistant. I can select that calendar, right click, come down here to sharing permissions, and a pop-up menu is going to show up. So under general, it's the name of the calendar, where it lives. I can go in and add a description. And so if you're working with multiple managers or you have multiple projects, the sharing of the calendars can be very, very helpful, because as you can see on my screen, I'm now showing two different calendars at the same time. I can also determine what appointment style I want to use. I'm using the generic default Windows appointment style. I can set the folder size. So if this gets to be larger than a certain size, we can have that calendar shut down, or I can make some changes to it. I can also set it up for archiving. So when you're working with multiple calendars and multiple people, looking at this archive feature is really, really powerful. So in this particular case, I'm not going to archive anything. However, I could come here and say, I would like to archive this folder whenever items are more than 3 months old, or more than 12 months old, or 13 months old. If you use the calendars for performance evaluations, annual planning, things like that, you might want to go 15 months instead of 12 months so that you have that historic data. The archives are still available, and they will go to an archive folder that you can go and open up. Again, depending on your IT security permissions, though, you may have to work with your IT folks to have access to that archive. I've worked in organizations where I was able to have ready access, but I've also worked in organizations where they did not want anybody except for the highest level of management to have access to that archive calendar. Your other option is to just permanently delete old items. If you do create and manage multiple calendars, one suggestion that I would make is to, when people leave the organization, follow whatever your company protocol is, but you can delete those old calendars maybe 6 months or a year after they're gone, because you're just taking up server space and it starts to clutter things up, especially if you're working with more than 4 or 5 people. All right, so we're going to cancel that. We're going to come back over here to shared calendars and back here to our holiday time off, sharing permissions. So if I wanted to give somebody access to my calendar, I would click add, and then I could find somebody from either my global address list. So in this case, I'm going to send it to Andrea. I click add, I click OK, and now I determine the permissions. So is it a view only, or is it an edit? And again, if you are managing calendars for one or more managers, you would want to ask for editing permission if your responsibility is to add appointments, reschedule appointments, delete appointments, etc. If it's just an information only, then viewing permission is okay. So for example, at my last job, I had view-only access to my boss's calendar. That way I knew what meeting she was in and where she was at if I had a problem, but I was not able to go in and add things or take things off of her personal calendar. So if I wanted to give Andrea permission to edit, notice it changes here. I click apply. Those permissions are now attached to her, and I click OK. If I want to change it, I can just go back to my sharing permissions, click remove, and that's gone. And then synchronization is how frequently do you want to update or synchronize this folder so that if you're working offline, you have the most current version. Again, depending on the calendar, in this case, I'm using a holiday time off calendar, not super critical for that to be synced. But if it was my weekly calendar with all of my meetings, I would want that synced on a very regular basis, like probably every couple of hours or at the very least at the end of the day, so that if something happened and I did have to go offline, I still have the most current version of the calendar. That also lets me get those same meeting updates by using my Outlook web on my phone. So if my laptop is somewhere else and I have my phone with me, I can still check the calendars, review the calendars, update calendars, etc. So I'm going to take a breath and pause and see if there's any questions before I move on. So if you've got a question, feel free to unmute yourself or type a question in the chat box. Okay. I'm assuming that means that everybody's okay. So I will go on to the next thing. In terms of setting calendars and colors, you can select one or more calendars. Let's say I want to show 4 different calendars. So this is how I can look at multiple calendars at the same time. So again, if you're managing multiple calendars for multiple managers, you can have a calendar for each of them, and it can be a shared calendar. So let's put my shared calendar up here too. You can then go in and color code them. So if I come over here and I right-clicked on this calendar, I can rename it, but if I come to the color palette, I can pick the color that I want. So right now I've got 2 gray calendars. If I am somebody who's very visually oriented, having those 2 gray calendars might not be such a good idea. So I can right-click, change my color, and so now I've got 4 different color-coded calendars that I can easily access and look at. Now, hovering over anything on the calendar itself will let me see that information. Start time, end time, the location. If I wanted to set up a reminder, I could also do that. So in this case, I right-clicked, and it brings up the event. If I'd like to schedule a reminder, Scheduling Assistant, I'm sorry, I went in the wrong place, but Scheduling Assistant would allow me to check everyone else's schedule as well. So if I click over here, let's say it was my organization and I wanted to take them to the hockey game, I could add their names and I could then check to see if they were free or available. So Microsoft will give you a code that lets you know if they're busy, if they're free, if they're unavailable. So in this particular case, because I haven't added them officially to my Outlook account, I'm getting this server error message. At your organization though, especially if you're using Exchange, which is what the majority of companies use, you would actually see color-coded areas that are designating free, busy, out of office, etc. And there are actual things within Microsoft that will allow you to set your status. And you would just click on that and set your status. So we're going to just pretend that everyone's free and they're ready to go to the game. Because this is an off-premise thing, we won't choose a room. However, if you have set up at your company a rooms calendar, you can also go in and pick a room to schedule a meeting in from that calendar. And so this has to be set up by your IT folks, the people who manage Exchange Server, but then that makes scheduling internal meetings very easy. Are there any questions about that? Okay, so it's not going to let me make changes to a read-only calendar, so I'm just going to close that out. I'm going to say don't save the changes. I've got my whiteboard here, so I'm going to shut my whiteboard off. I'm going to stop sharing for just a second so I can actually see your faces. And are there any questions so far? Has everyone used those features? Has anyone used any of those features? I see Heather saying yes. Okay, a couple of people are saying yes. Excellent. Okay, good. All but the color change. Okay. The color change to me is one of my favorite things to do because it does allow me when I have more than one calendar to just like at a glance go, okay, this is Mary's calendar. This is, Susie's calendar. This is the boss's calendar. So I am going to go in and show you a couple other things. And again, don't hesitate to ask questions, or if there's something you'd like to see, let me know. All right, so we're going to go back over here and we're going to take a look at that calendar again. So one of the other things is if you do have that group functionality, I'm going to move this talking out of the way. If you have the ability to do groups, if you are in the newest version, so Office 2016, and you click on Home, if you notice right over here in the far right corner is this thing called Calendar Groups. Because I'm not on Exchange server, I don't have access to calendar groups, but that's where you would find it. And again, the group is typically set up by your IT department. And then once that first group is set up, if you have the appropriate permissions within your organization, you can also set up groups. Once you set up the groups, you can then go in and have conversations. So it almost becomes an internal social network. So again, typical, meetings, new meetings. Now this one I like. If I have a new meeting, this field is going to pop up. If I've got Skype or Zoom, I can also automatically do that. I can give the meeting a title. I've got the option of required participants and then also optional participants. If you look over here on the right-hand side, you also see suggested times. So again, if you're scheduling this meeting for people within your organization, as you add their names to the participants list, you can also see if anybody has conflicts. So that's a really helpful feature for me, because then I can go, okay, this meeting won't work because the 3 people that I really need can't be there at that time. Let's find a pocket of time that works for everybody. You can also use the room finder, and again, that works if you have your meeting rooms booked. You can make a meeting recurring. So if I click on that, I get this window here that lets me schedule how frequently that is. So I'm going to have a meeting every Friday from 12 to 1. It's going to last an hour. And the last meeting, you can either give it a specific end date. You can end it after a specific number of meetings. So let's say we're going to end this after 6 meetings. And then I click OK. So now it's going to automatically schedule that for me for the next 6 meetings. And then let's say I want to invite myself. If I had a location, I could do the location. I don't have a room, so I'm not going to use that. If I go to my scheduling assistant, again, if my calendar was updated, I can see that here and I can go, okay, Tuesday at 10 o'clock seems to be better than Friday at 12 o'clock. So that's another option. We can also just show working hours, or you can show specific calendar details. You can refresh availability. So let's say that your manager asks you to schedule a meeting, and then at the last minute, just before you hit send, they're just like, oh, I need you to add somebody else. So you could refresh it and see what that availability is. And the question is, would groups be the same as distribution groups? Yes, they're pretty much the same as a distribution group. The biggest difference is, think of the newer groups in Outlook as more similar to a Facebook group, or if you've ever used Slack, it would be similar to that. And what's the difference between a meeting and an appointment? That's a great question. There's not a huge difference between a meeting and an appointment. Hang on, I'll get out of here and so I can show you. So an appointment and a meeting are basically the same. An appointment, though, is typically just for yourself versus a meeting where you're inviting other people. So here I might say that this is a recurring appointment. I have my one-on-one with my boss. So every week I have a one-to-one with my boss. We sit down, we talk about my performance. It lasts for 30 minutes. It's recurring. And I'm going to say it happens every Monday for no end date. And so now anybody who's trying to schedule something with me knows that I've got this time that's blocked. So I'm not available for a meeting, but it's not the same as an actual meeting. Did that help? Okay, excellent. And then in terms of distribution groups in the address book, so I want to go into that just a little bit further. Um, the new groups feature in Outlook has all of the functionality of a distribution list, but it also allows you to tag people, share documents, collaborate online. So if any of you belong to a Facebook group, for example, where you can post comments, you can tag somebody by either typing their name or using the @ sign and then typing their name. So Microsoft does the same thing. You can use the same collaboration features that are available in OneDrive and in SharePoint. So in your group, let's say that you have a work group and it's a task force and you're working on a major project. So that task force only has members of the task force. That's then your distribution list, but it also gives you the opportunity to edit documents together, collaborate on projects, instant message just members of the group. So it's a higher level of functionality. Did that help? I know I was kind of rambling there. It's really hard sometimes to explain it because Microsoft keeps changing things. Okay. So the other thing we're going to do is we'll take a look now at email. And you can create new folders within your email, just like you've always been able to do. So I can create a new folder. I can give it a name. So let's say I have a folder for anything that comes to me from the boss. So that's down here. And I can then move messages to it. So I'm going to open this up and I'm going to say categorize. I can color code it as well. So this is a work project. So now I have a blue flag. I can reply. If it was sent to multiple people, reply all. I can also set up times for follow-up. So let's say that this was a request to get a task done. So the follow-up is custom. And it gives me a bunch of flags. So this is going to really help when you're, again, if you've got multiple managers that you are trying to keep organized, you can actually set some different flags. So let's say that there's no response necessary and you're just sending a reminder like, hey, don't forget to do the performance reviews, no response is necessary. I can go in here and set a reminder that Tuesday, well, today is Tuesday, so we're going to say for Wednesday, at 8:30 a.m. and I'm going to flag that no response necessary, but there's something specific I need that person to be aware of. Or maybe it's a review. I need somebody to review some work for me. So my start date is Tuesday. My end date is going to be Thursday. I have a reminder set up for Wednesday at 8:30. That way I remind myself to review whatever that document is before it's due to the boss. I click OK. So now I have this flag here. So I've got a flagged item. It's color-coded, so it's in the folder. I've got the email, and I've got my little alarm clock. I can also create rules. So here's my question for everybody. How many of you use rules with Outlook? Does anybody create rules? Does anybody know what rules are? And turn share off for just a second. Okay, got some yeses, got some nos. Okay, cool. So for those of you that use rules, what do you like about using rules? And you can take yourself off mute and share with the rest of the group. Okay, a couple people say I don't. So those of you that use rules, what's one thing that you like about using rules or one way that you use rules? I see we have a very shy, quiet group. If I have to take my picture off, I'm going to have to look you guys in the eye and get a response here. Okay, Beverly says I can find specific emails quickly, organizes emails, message organization moves to folder, eliminates junk mail. Excellent, yes. So thank you so much. Rules are really powerful. So you can create rules that will organize and sort your mail. Let's say that you subscribe to the IAAP newsletter. You know that you're not going to have time to read it right away, but you don't want it to get lost in the clutter of all the other mail that comes. So you can create a rule in your Outlook that says, whenever I get an email that comes from this email address, move it to this folder. And then you can actually create additional layers within that rule of what to do with that message. So it is an excellent way to organize and keep track of messages. So some people are saying they've never used it. Let me go back to sharing for just a second. All right, so if we wanted to set up a rule, you can right-click, select rules. So right now it's automatically saying always move messages from, always move messages to, but I can create a rule. So when I get email with all of the selected conditions, so you can actually say from the certain sender, if the subject contains, let's say, newsletter, then anytime you get an email with the subject newsletter, you can move it to a folder. Let's say you want to move it to junk mail, or you want to move it to an archive folder, or you want to create a new folder. And I'm going to create a new folder called newsletter. So now whenever I get an email that has the word newsletter in the subject line, it's going to automatically put it into my newsletter folder. Now, if I want, I can also say display a new alert window. I've also got advanced options. And so this is where I was saying that rules can be super, super powerful because you can have as many conditions as you want. So let's say there's specific words that your manager uses. You can say, if it has these words, then follow this rule. So those are your conditions. And then down here, edit the rule description. So with the specific words, and now I can say, and so now I can apply that rule and get it even more specific. Then I click next. I double check to make sure I've got everything the way I like it. I click finish. And it's only going to work if I'm checking my mail in Outlook. But rules can be very, very powerful. I've known people that have so many rules set up, they take the time to do it because it is a little bit painstaking and time consuming, but then they have all of their mail automatically sorted and they have virtually an inbox zero. Within rules, can you forward to another person? Good question. I've never tried that before. Let's go to advanced options. Let's see. Send only marked as when my name is. Let's see. I'm sure you can. I will find out for you and tell you how to do it. I will find out and I will get back to you. I'm sure that there is a way to do it though. But so you've got things that have based on attachments, a certain size, a specific date. So there's all kinds of conditions. You can also, when you go to rules, manage rules and alerts. So here is where you can also apply additional changes. So you can also mark a thing as a priority. You can edit your rule settings. You can give your rules names. You can delete messages. You can also prioritize them. You can run your rules. So if you don't feel like it's working correctly, you can hit run rules. And if you've got rules that you created in a former version of Outlook, you can actually import those in as well. But I will double check about forwarding based on rules and let you know. And then you can also manage alerts from any Microsoft compatible alert source such as SharePoint. So if your organization uses SharePoint, you can also go in and set up alerts. Hopefully that was helpful for a couple of you. Because it's like every time I get into Microsoft, I learn something new. So that's one of my key things. So the other thing with the categories, again, you can see that I'm very color-coded. If I go to all categories, by default, Microsoft is going to give you a few category colors that they think you might like. So let's say this orange category here, I don't really have a reason to have an orange category. What I can do though is click the box to the left of it, come here and click rename. I can give it a new name. And the other thing I can do is change the colors. So you do have a broader palette of colors. You're not limited to just a handful of colors. So let's say that my job is making presentations for a living. So green is money. So I can give it the green color. I can also create shortcuts. So if you are somebody who likes to use keyboard shortcuts, then you can also create a shortcut for that. So if I do Control F2, instead of having to click, color code it, whatever, when I'm in the message, you can also use the shortcut with your F2, or you can go back the old school way. And so now when I'm in my calendar or in my email, I'm also going to see this color-coded bar that lets me know where I've categorized it. If I come over here, I see that I've got multiple things. This is categorized for presentations. It tells me that I need to do a review. I'm supposed to start it today. The project is due Thursday. I've got a reminder set up for tomorrow morning. So that's what this little information bar is about. If there are any other messages, let's say it's a conversational string, I can click on Find Related Messages. So I've got everything I need for that workflow all together in one place. And then I can also click Meeting, and it will send a meeting request directly to that person in that email. So let's say that I need to have a conversation with this employee about why I've removed the permissions on the shared calendar. I can now go in and set up a meeting. Let's say I need to have somebody from Human Resources there as well because, maybe they're getting terminated. So I click that person's name, go to Optional. And then if there's a resource that is needed, I can also do that. So I click OK. Now I have my meeting set up. My location is not Amadeus, but for right now, that's what I did as a resource. And then I could send this message to that person as well. Additionally, I can go in and format my text, just like you would in a normal email. I can review it. Microsoft is giving me a message saying, hey, look, we've hidden some commands. So if there's other things I wanted to do, message formats over there, plain text or HTML. If I wanted to, I could also set up a Zoom meeting. I can't do that right now because it's grayed out, but I have the option to look at different things or create a Zoom meeting, and then I can click send. Now in this particular case, I'm going to close out of this email because I don't want to send it and panic people. But that's another way that you can quickly integrate all of those features. So if somebody is in a message, click your three dots, and you can automatically set up a meeting with that person from that message itself. Another new feature that your operation may or may not have turned on for you is there is the ability to do your review built in now, just like you have in Word. So you can have the computer read your text aloud to you. You can get a word count. You have a very simple to use thesaurus, spelling and grammar check. If you come to insert, you can attach a file. You can have your signature built in. Now let's say that I've typed a few things in here. All right, so now if I come over here to insert, this insert options becomes more in depth. So if I have a chart that is in an Excel spreadsheet, I can insert that. I can do smart art, 3D modeling. What a lot of folks don't realize is this online pictures brings you to the Bing image search engine, and all of the images are licensed under a Creative Commons license, which means that you can use them without fear of violating copyright. So it's late at night, we want to add a coffee picture. So it was National Cappuccino Day the other day, so maybe I'm going to say, hey, I want to take everybody out for a cappuccino because you've just been working really hard. So I've got that image there. It's huge. So if I go to the upper corner, see that little dot? I can just left click and drag, and I can resize my image. Or I can right click on the image, go to format, and now it gives me all kinds of options. So I can crop it. I can change the size of it. I can add some special effects. I can change my background color. If I want to add text to that, I can. So that is now all built into your Outlook, just like you had in Word. The other thing that's really nice, I don't know if you've ever used this before, is the voting buttons. So let's say that you need somebody's answer. You want people to approve meeting minutes. So you can go in, use your voting buttons, and then when people read the message, they'll also see that voting button, and they can send you a quick response. So instead of this long email chain that goes back and forth, you just add those voting buttons, and you know right away if people are accepting or rejecting what you have said. You can also direct replies to a specific email address. So for example, if you send it out as a distribution list, but you want replies to go to a certain person. The delay delivery is one of my all-time favorite tools. This allows me to send messages even when I'm out of the office. So let's say that I'm going on vacation for the Thanksgiving holiday, but I want people to think that I'm still paying attention. I can say do not deliver before, and I can say the 22nd at 7:30 a.m., hit close, and then when it goes out, it's going to be delivered that morning, so it's a delayed message. The other thing that some places will let you do is use emojis. A lot of businesses have turned off the ability to use emojis within your email, but that is one of the new features. So you can see there's quite a few different things. I go back to my message. I've got emojis turned on. So if I wanted to send an emoji with my message, just like you use in text messaging or in Facebook, you have a whole slew of emojis that you can add to make your messages come to life. You also have the different skin tones. So that's what that's for. So if you notice here in the middle section, as I click the colors up here, anything that is not a yellow emoji, I can change the skin tone. And then the buttons up here at the top are just a quick sort. So if I just want to see animals, if I just want to see food, ideas, flags, etc. So questions so far. Did anybody learn anything new today? I'm going to stop sharing for just a second. Yes, back to the calendars. Okay, so, all right, I'm going to just go through these. So I will get back to you with an answer about the rules and whether you can forward to someone else. So I will let Yvonne know for sure. The voting buttons, yes, they are great for gathering responses. So no, you do not have to be logged on to send the delayed message. You do set the delay up when you're currently logged into the system, but then it will automatically send it even if you're not anywhere near your computer, which is why I really like it, because if I'm traveling, I can still send messages and people are receiving them and I don't have to worry about, oh, did I send that message? So you have to be logged in when you create it, but it will send itself afterwards unless something has changed. I will double check. Let's see, personal email that I use, and I have a separate email that's used by my whole department. One colleague shares his calendar through my personal email, but I prefer to have through the shared email. Do I have to have him resend the sharing, or can I move the calendar? That's a good question. Depending on the sharing permissions, you should be able to move it yourself without having to ask him, but it really depends on what permissions you have had assigned to you with that calendar. Okay, so yeah, it will show that you got something stuck in your outbox. Sometimes Microsoft does act up with those delayed messages, but I have had, let's say, 95% success rate sending those delayed messages when I am away from the computer and they've gone through with no problem. Any other questions? Has anybody learned anything beneficial so far? Okay, got a few head shakes, got a few maybes. All right. I'm going to show you one last little thing here because I know we're almost out of time. And when I start talking technology, I can just talk to you for hours, so I'm not going to do that. So this is Outlook Web Access. And I'm going to just move this down here. So if you're using OWA, Outlook for Web, it's going to look similar to what you saw in the email earlier. So I've got it set up to send from my company email, but also from my regular. When I'm working on web only, I do have the ability to encrypt certain messages. So if I don't want anyone to forward a message that I'm sending when I'm sending a message from my phone, for example, I can choose encrypt and prevent forwarding, or just encrypt. If I choose encrypt, it's going to make it much more difficult for somebody to read that message. And of course, they're going to take me to their help because I said, learn about encrypt. It is a brand new feature, so you may not have that yet. When you choose encrypt, it stays within the Office 365 environment. And if you use encrypt and prevent forwarding, it stays within Office 365 and it cannot be copied or forwarded. So let's say that you are sharing confidential information that you don't want to leave the area. That's when that encrypt would come in handy. Yeah, it's a very new feature, like within the last few months, and only on OWA. So it may not have rolled out to everyone yet. The other thing that's kind of cool is, depending on how your work environment is set up, if you go to your settings, you can go in and manage your settings. You can go in and, again, look at calendars. I can look at my weather calendar. I can look at events that I have from email. Now, this one is kind of cool too. And again, when you're managing multiple managers or multiple tasks, when you're in OWA events from email, you do have the ability to add events to your calendar from email. Gmail has done this for a while. So let's say that you've got flight reservations and hotel reservations, you're planning a trip for your manager. That information then can go straight to your calendar from the email that says, hey, you're confirmed on Southwest Airlines flight 1234. It departs Tuesday morning at 7 a.m. and it returns Thursday. Outlook's gonna pull that information directly from the confirmation email, and if you've selected that, it will load that into your calendar. That works for hotel reservations, flights, car rentals, package delivery, dining reservations, events, and then bills. So I didn't choose bills here, but if you're responsible for paying bills for your department and you get recurring notifications, you may also want to do that. Shared calendars. I can select a calendar to share with people and decide, just like I did on the desktop version. And then I can also get notifications. So because I've shared my calendar and allowed people to edit it, I can also say, send me a notification when somebody makes a change to my calendar or if something is different. So click save, otherwise it won't let you go. Then you can also customize some actions. For example, this get add-ins. Again, the get add-ins is going to vary based on your IT permissions, but you can add different add-ins to your calendar that adds additional functionality. So for example, if you're at a company that uses Trello, which is a project management software, you can add this get add-in and go out to Trello and download that so it integrates with your calendar. If there's different emojis or if you've created some templates, you can also use that. So I'm just going to save everything right now so you can see it. And again, this is going to look slightly different on the web than it is within your desktop. This manage premium over here is where we just were. If there's any kind of premium functionality, that will give you updates on that, lets you know what's new. You can also, if you're using the newest version of Outlook, do what's called dark mode. And a lot of people like dark mode instead of the normal because it puts less strain on your eyes. So you can toggle that on or off. You can also determine in conversation view if you want your newest messages on the top or on the bottom. Just like in standard Outlook, you can determine where that reading pane is, on the right, on the bottom, or hide. Focused inbox is also something new that Microsoft has implemented. It's a way to help you better manage your time. So you might want to take a look at that. And then again, there's lots and lots of settings. You can pick your theme. So, if you want to do a Lego theme, you can click view all. Again, some of these may or may not be available based on your IT department settings. Click over here. This is my reading pane. When I click over here, this is sort of my what they call the 9-square menu, and it gives you quick access to everything that you have in your account. So let's say that I wanted to pull up a document that we were collaborating on that is in Word. So go here, and this is how I can edit in real time because I have a OneDrive account. I can bring that document up, share it with somebody, and then we can start collaborating in real time on the document. I can see where people have edited. So if I want to share, all right, so then they can edit it once I share it. The other option is if you're sending it to a distribution list, you can get a link. You can copy that link, put it inside your distribution email, and that gives multiple people access to share it. So I can come over here now, back in my email, I'm going to send a new message. It's going to go out to my distro. Edit this. Here's the link. It will go out to them. I can put in a little emoji going, please do that. I can also add a GIF if I want to have that as long as my settings allow that. I send it out to them. They have a link to this. They now have access to my OneDrive folder, and they can edit straight from that email. So that's, again, a fairly new feature that a lot of people have not been using quite to its potential. All right, so we are at 7:52. So I am going to stop talking. It's only that folder. Okay, so if you have a folder, Yvonne, that's a great question. If you have a folder, you can set up permissions to share the folder, or you can set up permissions just to share that document. And then just like we saw with the calendars, you can set permissions for people to either edit the document or just view the document. So let's say that you're working on a proposal that your boss needs. You don't want them to go in and leave comments because you can use the insert comment feature. You can also share, when you share with multiple people within the file itself, not a folder, everyone gets their own color-coded flag. So let's say that Sophia and Debbie and myself and Kathy and Heather were all working on the same document. There would be 5 color-coded flags. So when I hover over the flag, I can see which person specifically made those edits into the document. But I can also share folders. So if somebody wants to load something into the folder, they can do that as well. Other questions? You're welcome. So it's what Microsoft has done with this newest version of Office is it's like they've taken the best of Dropbox and some of the functionality from Google Drive and some of the functionality from social media and put it all together to make a one-stop shop within that Microsoft Office environment. There's some other tools that are coming in the very near future that are just rolling out in beta right now. And yes, you can send the sharing link to Outlook users. Yes, you can, with the caveat that as long as your IT department allows you to share that with external sources. So if you're sharing on a OneDrive, then most likely you'll be able to share it with no problem. If the document is being hosted on a SharePoint site, which is a little bit different, oftentimes IT departments are going to lock that down more tightly than they will OneDrive. So if you can't, you may need to check with your IT folks to say, can I share this? And this is coming from personal experience too, where some of the things that I had on SharePoint, I had to go through special permission channels to get outsiders access to it. Next question. Okay. Yvonne, what else would you like?
Mary, I actually have a question. So we have been pushing out using the SharePoint more, sharing the documents, having that whole collaborative environment. I'm getting a lot of errors when I'm sharing documents with people. Some people are able to access them. Some people can't access them, no matter how we switch it up, change it around. What could be the problem? Because we're all in the same firm, and I'm sharing it the same way with everyone. Is that an IT question, or are they just saying they're doing what they're supposed to do, but they're not?
No, I would say that it is most likely a question for either IT or your SharePoint administrator, because on the back end, you will never know how everybody's account has been configured. And so it could be a back-end permission thing. I was a low-level SharePoint administrator at my last job, and that was a frequent problem because managers had certain permissions where they could see documents that non-managers couldn't see. We used it to share all of our training curriculum around the world. And so trainers had fewer permissions, and so we would post something and then they couldn't see it. And we're just like, but it's in SharePoint. So then we had to get with the SharePoint administrators to make sure that their permissions were correct.
Okay, I wondered about that. I wondered if it had to do with the level of the person and their level of permissions.
Right.
Because I'm thinking, if I'm sharing this document with you, that should be the end of the discussion. I'm saying this person can have access to the document. They can edit the document, but they're still not able to open it. I didn't think about that. That's good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else? Was this worth spending an hour?
Yes.
All right. Well, it's sometimes I kind of like get into like, I'm just going to talk mode. And so I just want to make sure that it was worth your time. For those of you that use Zoom, here's a quick little Zoom tip for you too. I don't know if you've used this before, but within Zoom, you can create poll questions. And so that is a new feature. So it's a great way to check just kind of where people are at. And then you should just be able to pick an answer. So I'm seeing one person voted. And at any point, then you can end that polling. So for those of you that do a lot of Zoom meetings, if you're trying to make sure that like your managers are staying engaged or involved, you can set up those poll questions on the front end before you even begin the meeting. And then you can just pop those poll questions up.
That's a good tip. That's a good tip, Mary. Well, this was great. I enjoyed it. I can't wait to go play with colors tomorrow and play in the web environment and just try out a lot of new things. Our company is really, really pushing us fully using that 360 environment. They really, really want us to do it.
Yeah, no, it's once you get used to it, it's very powerful. I just did a session last week for another group on how to just do the in-depth collaboration within Office 365. And they walked away from that going, holy cow, I didn't know I could do all those things. So again, they're like, oh, wow, that's so neat.
Well, this was great. I have so enjoyed tonight. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Mary.